Hey guys, this is Mac, otherwise known as McLeod, and today we're going to be watching some Black Ops 3 gameplay, kill confirmed to be exact. Also, we're going to be talking about some of the economics of gaming and some issues that need to be addressed, and hopefully when they're addressed, we see some change. But without further ado, let's get started. Alright guys, let's get started. First of all, let me give you a little bit of background about Black Ops 3. It's a first-person shooter, and it came out this year in November, and it's actually really fun. And I decided I wanted to, capture some gameplay and talk about some economics of games. I know some people that might be watching this don't really care about video games, but, some of it is pretty interesting, so maybe you'll find something that you like. Okay, first on the docket, we're going to talk about how video game companies are releasing half games and expecting consumers to spend upwards of $100 on them to get all of the content. And I have had an issue with this, over the course of the past year, because I've been seeing it, become more prominent. And what it is they'll release any game company, Ubisoft, Microsoft, well, that's a first-party game company, but Rockstar, etc. They release a game, $60. For example, Black Ops 3 is a perfect example, actually. Ironically enough, the game releases at $60 as a price point. You go to GameStop, you pick it up, and the price tag you're going to see on it is $60, and they expect you to, maybe not expect, but they want you to buy a season pass along with the game. And what the season pass does is it gives you all the downloadable content that you could get for the game. It gives you basically guaranteed access to it for a cheaper price than if you bought it as it came out individually. So usually with Call of Duty, they'll release 4 DLCs. DLC is downloadable content, and each DLC would be $15 each. So if you add that up, it ends up being $120 to get every piece of content that goes with the game. And what the season pass does is it basically makes you commit to all of the DLCs for a slightly cheaper price. For the Black Ops 3 season pass, it was $50 when I bought it, and I honestly was really mad about buying the season pass, just because of the fact that there's no real guarantee that what you're buying is gonna be that good. And I've had that happen to me before in the past, where I bought a season pass and the DLC that was on the season pass was very subpar, and I think that is kind of atrocious, but I understand how it happens. It's the free market and things like this can happen, but I think that it's creating somewhat of an unfair landscape for consumers regarding gaming, because they have to basically commit to a package that they don't know what they're getting. And I read an article on the internet about this, and they had a really good parallel, and it was talking about how it was like a parallel to how the banks in the early 2000s did somewhat of a similar thing. Basically, in the early 2000s, banks devised a way to turn their subprime loans into a tradable asset, which allowed two things to happen. First, banks could sell off the assets, removing them from the balance sheet and leaving them with no more money, or with more money to give loans. Second, it means that the banks no longer bore any risk if their borrowers defaulted. That means they couldn't pay back their loans, since the loans were no longer on the balance sheet. So they had less incentive to ensure that their borrowers would be able to repay their loans. The result was a culture where banks made profits by creating incredibly bad loans, ones that were basically guaranteed to fail, and selling them off as packaged assets, shifting the inevitable losses onto the unsuspecting buyers of those securities. And so basically that was before 2008, and the gaming industry has been basically giving publishers willingness to do the exact same thing, selling something to gamers whose risk potential isn't fully appreciated, where they have little incentive to ensure that what they're selling is of a respectable quality. And there's a few things that are wrong with this, and there's a few things that is also right with this. I mean, from an economic standpoint, you know, if you're looking at it from the point of view of the company, it's actually really genius. But if you're looking at it from the point of view from the consumer, it's you could feel robbed in a way. You know, you're not really getting what you're paying for. Sometimes, you know, it's not necessarily always the case, but sometimes you're gonna get shirked, and that's just something that I have a little bit of an issue with. But at the same time, I love games, so I'm willing to deal with it. Okay, next talking point is in-app purchases. In-app purchases have been very prevalent over the past few years with the evolution of smart devices. You know, most everybody, you know, living in the first world has some kind of smartphone, and you know, they have apps, games, etc. that have in-app purchases, which are, for people who don't know, basically it's in the name, purchases that you can make inside of the app to enhance your basically time with the app. If we're talking about games specifically, then usually what an in-app purchase will do will be make it easier and faster to progress. And with in-app purchases, I didn't really have an issue with them at first, because, you know, why would you? But I'm starting to see a little bit of a trend, and it's starting to scare me, actually. You know, in-app purchases were, you know, beforehand they were only prevalent in video games that were on, you know, your phone or your tablet, etc., etc. But it's starting to become a little bit more prevalent on actual console games and PC games, which I think is definitely not okay, because what this basically creates is a way for people to play, you know, the game without actually playing the game. You know, you get so much progression, you get so much basic. I think I consider it technically a way of cheating. Like, if you buy an in-app purchase on a console video game to make your game easier, then I mean, that's something that I guess is a consumer's choice. But what my biggest fear is that it's gonna cause the game publishers to start putting out content that basically makes it so the game is harder to play without paying for the in-app purchases, and that is about 3 times more despicable than the season pass notion. And I cannot stress enough how frustrating it would be to have to play a game that I can't beat because of the fact that I'm not willing to spend more money on it than I already did. I don't think that's too much to ask at all. But I mean, that's just me. Everyone has their own opinion, and I'm definitely, you know, willing to respect and listen to all these opinions, but these are just things that irk me in a way. But like I said, these are very first world problems to have, and in some people's eyes they're not even problems. Regardless, there's a huge group of people that are very passionate about video games and everything that has to do with them, myself included. And for these people, I want my opinion to be known and want to see if anyone agrees with me, because I think it's very important that we have games that, you know, are affordable for the average consumer, because I think video games is a great way to, you know, release aggression and anger that, you know, comes out, you know, in the world as a whole. But thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed my gameplay. Have a nice day.